Across 18 model years from 1984 to 2001, the Jeep Cherokee had 8 different transmissions. Of those, 3 are automatics and 5 are manuals. Knowing what transmission you have is an integral part of understanding your XJ, but thankfully things aren't as complicated as they seem. I'm going to tell you right now that chances are, if you're watching this video, you have the AW4 automatic, so in case you already know what transmission you have, there are chapters on the video play bar so you can skip ahead to which one you need to know about. I'm going to run through all 8 real quick and then elaborate on each one individually. The information in this video will apply to the Cherokee XJ and Comanche MJ, but be aware of using this to reference other Jeep vehicles from the era, as they sometimes use different transmissions behind the same engines. First up, the AX4 is a 4-speed manual, and the AX5 is the exact same transmission, but with 5 speeds. In 1987, with the introduction of the 4-liter engine, the base transmission was the Peugeot BA-105. It's a 5-speed manual that was used until mid-model year 1989, when it was replaced by the far superior AX15. The AX15 was used until 1999, and in model year 2000 was replaced by the NV3550. These are all 5 speeds, only ever mounted to the 4.0. Moving on to the automatics, the XJ first saw a 3-speed option from the Chrysler A904 used behind the 4-cylinder and V6 from 1984 through 86. The 4-cylinder XJ wouldn't have an automatic option again until 1994, when a revised variant of the A904 called the 30RH was introduced. The 30RH is also a 3-speed automatic, available for the 2.5-liter engines from 94 to 2000. Lastly, if you have a 4-liter engine and an automatic from any year in the XJ or MJ, you've got the AW4. The AW4 is a 4-speed automatic with a locking torque converter and is the strongest transmission available in the XJs. Alright, now I'll cover each transmission in more detail and give a summary of how reliable they are. The AX4 was manufactured by Ace & Warner, a Japanese company closely tied with Toyota. It's a simple gearbox with nothing to it, and was always paired with an axle ratio of 3.54 to 1. The AX4 is a relatively weak transmission, only ever mated to a 4-cylinder engine. It can handle some light off-roading and will last forever under casual driving, but don't try to push it. Usually, people swap an AX15 in its place. The AX5, once again, is just the same thing, but it has 5th gear. It takes the same fluid, although slightly less, but usually has an axle ratio of 4.10 to 1 for some more versatility with the overdrive gear. The AX5 is slightly weaker than the AX4, but they're both generally very respectable old-school transmissions. The AX5 was standard for the GM 2.8-liter V6 seen in 1984 through 86 and was the only transmission available for the Renault 2.1-liter turbo diesel in 85 through 87. It was an optional upgrade from the AX4 on the 2.5-liter engines from 1984 through 1987 and was otherwise standard for the 4-cylinder from 1988 and onwards. Interestingly, the AX4 and 5 have the lowest available gear ratio of any transmission on offer at 4.74 to 1 in reverse. The BA-105 was manufactured by Peugeot and was just a placeholder transmission used behind the earliest 4.0s. The 105 is well known for its reputation of being a steaming pile of absolutely worthless scrap metal with internals made out of cereal and the strength of the American education system. Basically, my ex if she was a gearbox. The 105 uses extremely expensive parts and, despite being a manual, is indisputably the least reliable transmission used in the XJs. It's effectively a sedan transmission in a Jeep, which doesn't work well in literally any situation. I can confidently warn you about its infamous unreliability because I've got one in my MJ, and it leaks fluid at an alarming rate. Shifting into second gear is a task deemed impossible when cold. Accelerating at any speed makes the entire gearing assembly twist to one side. You can't take it out of any gear unless the clutch is pressed. It only goes in reverse if there's a full moon on Thursday, and all of this happens despite it already being rebuilt less than 60,000 miles ago. The 105 uses a 5/16" square bit drain and fill plug, which means you need an imperial-sized metric tool for a European transmission in an American vehicle. It doesn't get any more AMC than that. All of them used internal slave cylinders, but different years had different gear ratios, output shaft spline count, and most notably, it has a vertically split case, which just means it never won't leak gear oil. So, before I invent some new vocabulary, I'm going to move on to the AX15, which thankfully replaced the 10.5 in late 1989. The AX15 did away with the internal slave cylinder in 1994 and always had a 3.07 to 1 axle ratio. It is considered to be the best transmission ever put in a Jeep, with strength and reliability unmatched to any other 5-speed at this point. It uses the same fluid and has the same drain and fill plugs as the AX4 and 5. The AX15 is often found adapted to replace other weak manual transmissions in Jeeps, such as the Peugeot BA105, the AX5, and sometimes even replacing the AW4. In 2000, the AX15 was replaced for the NV3550, which is pretty much the same transmission but a little bit more refined around the edges. Interestingly, the NV3550 is the only manual transmission I've ever heard of that has a synchronized reverse gear. It uses very specifically Mopar MS9224 fluid because of the unique synchronizer setup and has a 17mm drain plug. The NV3550 is much more common in TJs, but many aren't aware it was used for the last 2 model years of the XJ. Moving on to automatics, the A904 and its 30RH variant are once again pretty much the same transmission. Both request ATF plus 4, and both are really hard to find information for. Their reliability is masked entirely by the fact that they don't seem to exist. The only one I've ever seen anywhere had 420,000 miles on it, but who knows how many times the transmission had been replaced or rebuilt. If anyone out there actually has a 4-cylinder automatic Cherokee, I'd love to see it. Lastly, the AW4 is pretty much the only automatic you'll see in an XJ, always with a 3.55 to 1 axle ratio. The AW4 is an impressively reliable and strong transmission. With it, the towing capacity of an XJ is at 5,000 pounds, which is almost twice what the entire vehicle itself weighs. Some sources online say the AW4 requests ATF plus 4 fluid, but that is not correct. They originally used Dexron 2, but Mercon doesn't make that particular fluid anymore, so its backwards compatible replacement, Dexron 3, should be used instead. The reason some claim ATF plus 4 is the right fluid is because in 2007, Chrysler changed the factory service bulletins for the Cherokee, switching the fluid from Dexron 3 to ATF plus 4. Now, you might wonder why they would randomly do this 5 years after the last Cherokee rolled off the line, but consider 5 years is exactly when the last of the warranties expired, so introducing a new fluid to the transmission might cause it to fail, which means you need to waste all your money either getting that fixed at a certified Chrysler dealership, of course, or buy a new car at a certified Chrysler dealership, of course. But in perhaps the most Uno reverse card moment ever pulled by an automotive part, the AW4 doesn't fucking care what kind of fluid you put in it, and will run just fine on ATF plus 4. The simple fact that an automatic of all transmissions, doesn't care what fluid is in it, should tell you everything you need to know about the AW4. It's a badass transmission. That being said though, I did destroy one by racing it a few times, so they're not indestructible. So here's some tables displaying some of the basics, and if you need to remove your transmission for any number of reasons, I do have a video documenting the removal and installation process on the XJ. Also in the description is a cut script section where I was going to talk about why the Cherokee is the best car ever because of the 4-liter AW4 combo, so you can go read that too if you want. If you're new to XJs, I have a few other introductory videos explaining the transfer cases, axles, and evap system, among various other repair tutorials. Thanks for watching, and good luck with the project.